Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Trilateral talks involving Russia, Ukraine and the United States are set to take place in Abu Dhabi as President Volodymyr Zelenskyy awaits confirmation on signing security guarantees. With territorial disputes unresolved and fighting ongoing, we're joined by Louis Wierenga. He's a lecturer in international relations at the Baltic Defence College to assess what these negotiations really mean. Louis, welcome back to TVP World. Thanks for taking the time, as always.
Good evening. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. So tell me, what are these talks all about and how are they going to be any different?
Well, they're obviously high stakes, but it seems like we're really at an impasse because it's all about territory. President Zelenskyy has said that he and U.S. President Donald Trump have agreed on their end of the bargain, but we don't know details as of that in full. But neither Russia nor Ukraine seem to be willing to budge. Now, Ukraine is under a lot of pressure from the Trump administration to reach a deal, but President Trump and President Zelenskyy seem to have had a pretty good talk in Davos because President Zelenskyy seemed to be in rather good spirits after that talk. But I think it all comes down to territory because Putin is demanding that Ukraine surrender the 20% that it still holds in the Donetsk region, which is about 5,000 square kilometers. And basically, the Russians have said that they're going to keep assaulting Ukraine and they're going to keep pushing on the front lines while all of the talks are going on until something is concretized.
Right. So I mean, there are so many aspects to this. First of all, these are not the first peace talks, but they are the first trilateral peace talks since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022. Now, that would suggest some kind of move forward. But it doesn't sound as though anything has changed, really. Both sides are sticking to their guns. Russia says it wants land. Ukraine says no way, constitutionally not allowed to. And meantime, Russia keeps attacking. I mean, is Russia attacking? Is Russia behaving in good faith? Does it really intend to reach some kind of peace agreement, let alone security guarantee?
Of course, they're not acting in good faith. And the bad thing about that is how are we going to expect them to act in good faith if there's a deal that's actually signed? Now, one thing about the trilateral meeting is that it's not really sure if everyone's going to be in the same room, although I would imagine that they would be if everyone's traveling all that way. The U.S. is going to be brokering this. But you're right, this is the first trilateral meeting since the full-scale war began. And President Zelenskyy said last month that the 20-point U.S. plan to end Russia's war of aggression was 90% ready. But again, it all comes down to territory. And I think that this is going to be, if it's successful, a feat of strength and diplomacy. But the other big issue up for discussion besides territory at these meetings is what the United States will do militarily if Russia were to invade Ukraine again, which there's no real signs that they wouldn't, given the nature and scale of the war of aggression. So if we think back to the second previous meeting in Moscow between Witkoff, Kushner, and the Kremlin. Out of that meeting, I believe it was Jared Kushner that mentioned that the people of Ukraine will know that something like this will never happen again, which are very, very strong words. So the big question is, what are the security guarantees that are essential for Ukraine that the U.S. has promised? And I think the only clue we can take away from this is the meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy at Davos, and Zelenskyy looking upbeat after those meetings, which I hope is very optimistic and actually turns out to be an optimistic cause.
Right, I'll come back to the security guarantees in just a second, Louis, but let's stay with the territory for a second. There was some talk of making the occupied territory an economic zone, free of military presence. Has that gone out of the window, that proposition?
I don't think that it's gone out of the window, but one of the things is that if it's demilitarized, the Kremlin wanted to have National Guard and Russian police officers in the territory, which is definitely a no-go for Ukraine and for right reasons. But the key about this is that it's vital to the defense for the rest of Ukraine because the territory is much flatter. And so the territory west of Donetsk, so that would make a Russian advance western a little bit easier for them. Although Ukrainian soldiers are fighting like true warriors, but the urge for the Russians will be to sort of try to get some wiggle room to launch further assaults deeper into Ukraine. And if it's a demilitarized zone, then there needs to be something in the discussion that absolutely makes certain that Russia won't use little green men and they won't try to have some bogus claim, just like the whole war of aggression is being phrased as a special military operation. So that's another concern, because there are fears and there are thoughts that Russia will just use some time to rearm after a deal and then use Donetsk to sweep even further westwards. So it is very, very important to make sure that it's demilitarized, but that there's an enforcement mechanism. And here's where the security guarantees from both the United States and European allies are so key and crucial for that very reason.
Right. So what do you think the security guarantees could be to be effective against such a second invasion by Russia, if you like, of Ukraine?
Well, one thing is that the U.S. hasn't really decided who should administer the territory, and that's also a key. Political control over the territory. And that's, I think, going to be something in this trilateral meeting that's also going to be fairly high on the agenda, is that it's going to be very, very hard for anybody to sign off on Russia administering the territory. Now, if you ask about security guarantees, if there is a deal in place that makes Donetsk a demilitarized zone, then there will likely be a European presence fairly close, and we'll have to see how close is too close for Mr. Putin, but also how, and they should be very close. I mean, they should be there and they should be ready. It should be an actual deterrence by denial, not deterrence by just being in place relatively far away in case there was an incursion. And there should also be mechanisms in place to make sure that no one comes in under the guise of the Russian National Guard or the Russian police force. But I think the importance is the American backstop, and all eyes are looking to a firm U.S. commitment, which we haven't really heard the specifics of yet. And that might be President Trump playing his hand closely in negotiations with the Russians through his either through his meetings with Putin or his special envoys. But I think there needs to be a clear presence from several European nations, preferably the U.S. as well, very close to the region, to ensure that no treachery goes on after this deal is made, when it's made.
Well, quite, and also to take away Putin's, it seems, what he believes is his right to say who can and cannot be a part of any security guarantee force. Louis, as always, thank you so much for sharing your analysis with our audience.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye now. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, lots more coming up. Goodbye.